Today we are discussing a very important topic, the link between insecurity and the political instability in our dear country, Nigeria. Insecurity has become one of the major challenges in Nigerian politics. Issues such as terrorism, banditry, kidnapping, communal clashes that affect life, governance, and national development across our dear country, Nigeria. To help us understand the link between insecurity and political instability, I am joined by a university lecturer from the Department of Political Science, University of Maiduguri, who is Baba Abdullahi Machina. Baba Abdullahi, welcome to Political Arena on S24 television.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So what is the connection between insecurity and political instability, especially in the northern part of the country?
Thank you very much for this. I think we need to understand that security, before we even talk about the link between the insecurity and political stability, we also need to understand that security almost everywhere in Nigeria, not only limited to northern part of the country. Of course, maybe from the beginning of the insecurity that it is only confined to the northeastern part of Nigeria. I came from northeast and I know what we have gone through for almost more than a decade. That there has been insecurity of Boko Haram that continue to create a lot of challenges, especially governance challenges and other developmental challenges over time. But then we have seen the security has now taken another dimension. Of course, before 2015 election, before Buhari came on board, I think it was insecurity and corruption that has been used as or capitalized by the opposition to unseat Jonathan administration. Jonathan was out of power and then the insecurity continued to persist. I'm not saying that the government is not taking any decisive action over time to address the challenges of the insecurity, but it continued to escalate. What we are doing now in terms of addressing the security is we are scratching the surface. And by doing so, we cannot be able to address the root causes of the problems.
Okay. So in what ways does insecurity affect the public trust, especially among Nigerians?
Well, the public trust, it has already been declined, and that was as a result of the insecurity in the country. When I say insecurity, now we are not limiting to only northern part of the country. You have seen what happened in Oyo State. We have seen what happened in Kwara State,
Niger.
And then Niger State. You can name them. There are almost insecurity in almost part of this country. In fact, even here in Abuja, you can travel 100 kilometers and whatever direction that your safety is guaranteed 100%. So that trust is not there. It has already declined. Because if we should remember that one of the primary responsibility of government everywhere in the world is to protect life and property of the citizens. And that is number one. But government failed woefully to do for upon that responsibility.
Government is trying. You can't just paint government has failed woefully.
Yeah, yes, of course, government has tried.
Because when Buhari came on board, where he came from, it was actually volatile. But when Buhari came, during his area as the president of Nigeria, at least they have been, normalcy have returned in most part of Maiduguri.
Yeah, yes, I agree. Normalcy has returned in some part of Maiduguri, not Maiduguri precisely, but in Borno. Some part of Borno as a state. But I assure you there are places today that is not accessible in Borno State. There are communities. Remember that there are a lot of issues that happened under this administration. In fact, it was even happened under Buhari administration. It was just of recent, not less than 3 or 4 months ago, General was killed, senior military officers was killed, So all those things, there are places in Borno that you cannot go. Of course, I'm not saying that the government is not doing enough. Yes, government is doing enough, but we need proactive and decisive action in tackling those insecurity issues. Now, the insecurity has already taken another dimension. If you say Borno is safe now, okay, what of the north central part of the country? What about the northwestern part of the country?
But we saw some clips going on online. The Senate president is saying that some people are actually using the issue of insecurity in order to jeopardize the good work that this government have been doing.
Is it not the responsibility of the government to bring to justice whoever is accused of those, capitalizing on the insecurity? Of course, that has been the conversation in the country. Of course, in fact, we need to go beyond that conversation.
To your own perception, that is just a political distraction.
That is just a political distraction. It is the responsibility of the government to protect life and property of the citizens. Why the government is coming out to say that?
So when the government failed to do that, what are the possible solutions to do that? Because security, we believe, is very, very paramount and vital.
Yes, security is almost everybody's business. It is you and I's business.
So what are the solutions to the issue of insecurity, especially we are heading toward 2027?
The issue of insecurity. To be honest, to be realistic, you will see more of insecurity as we are approaching 2027 election.
Is that a political distraction too?
It is. But it is also responsibility of the government to ensure that it protect life and property of the citizens. And that is why when you talk about the trust, I told you that the trust is declined. If one of the primary responsibility of the government everywhere in the world is protect life and properties, and government fail to do that, to some extent, I may agree that maybe some part of the country is being secured, but which part of the country is 100% secured? You can travel in the night, you can sleep, your two eyes closed. Which part of the country is secured? So we have a lot of security challenges, and that public trust is declining, and that is one of the challenges of democracy that we're facing in this country.
You came from the academic line. So what are you doing from your own part in order to make sure that this country remain a stable, peace, and governable?
Well, it is not a job of only one person.
It's a collective responsibility.
It's a collective responsibility. And that is why the community policing is very important.
Are you also advocating for state police?
Yes, to some extent, because what I really don't want part of this state police is where governors will have the tendencies of
manipulate them.
We have seen what they have been doing with their political talks, ECOMOG and what have you. But by the time you say the state police is under their control, you see how democracy is being practiced in Nigeria. You see how democracy is being, whatever it is, we don't even observe the basic tenet of democracy. All those things. So now, if you say state police, of course, yes, I am advocate of that. But I think we need to be very careful in handling the police affairs to the control or under the control of the state governors. We have seen their track record of manipulating and taking advantage of the security that is under their own control.
But you see that these are all allegations because do you really have factual data to back that?
Well, you see, there are no data that can speak to that. I'm not saying that there are no data or completely, but to my own knowledge, I haven't across any data that speak to that. But then you need to also understand that these are something that you can see in everyday life. If somebody is an activist, you criticize the government, you hold the government accountable, you say, where is the money go? And we need to hold you accountable. The next tomorrow, you'll see somebody who will come and pick you in the house. And then they use these state apparatus, they use state resources, and then they use state, this ECOMOG and all of that, and their own vigilante, especially in northern part of in northeastern part of the country. Before you have been taken to.
Well, before we draw the curtain of the program, ahead of 2027, what are your calls to Nigeria, especially you that you came from the northeastern part of the country? I believe now there's a relatively peaceful in northeastern part of the country. So what are your calls in ensuring going for credible leaders that will continue to make sure this country remain our dear country, Nigeria?
Well, my call to action is very simple. That is why I always argue that democracy only functions when citizens are well educated and well active. And that is one of the foundations of democracy. And one of the biggest problems that we are facing, before I come to that call to action, I really wanted to say that one of the biggest challenges that we are facing in terms of democracy in Nigeria is weak accountability. There are also, weak governance, and there are corruption. Corruption is almost everywhere in this country, in the states, in the federal, wherever, as far as government is concerned, there are a lot of corruptions. And this money is earmarked for education, for health, for infrastructure.
You have 13 seconds to run it
Okay,
up.
yes. So my call to action is that government has to be very decisive and proactive. We need to go beyond talking. We need to go beyond making rhetoric and all of that. We need decisive action in tackling this insecurity once and for all. We cannot continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, insecurity will continue to persist, and every election cycle will say X, Y, Z. I think we need to go beyond that.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure speaking to you here on S24 Political Arena. And that is all what we have on S24 Political Arena.